What's up, y'all? You want to add a musical to your fall theater lineup? Well, Paramount Theater's new venue in downtown Aurora has you covered with Million Dollar Quartet. At Paramount Stope Island Theater, you can go back in time to one night with Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Elvis, and Jerry Lee Lewis and rediscover hits like Walk the Line, Who Do You Love, and much more. Grab your tickets today at ParamountAurora.com or call the box office at 630-896-6666. What's up, y'all? It's one of my favorite times of the year. Yes, it's officially fall theater season, and here's a show you got to check out. Steppenwolf presents Noises Off by Michael Frayn and directed by Tony Award-winning ensemble member Anna D. Shapiro. It's a co-production with the Geffen Playhouse, and this meta play within a play will have you LOLing, LMAOing, LMFAOing, and all night long. Noises Off is on stage now through October 27th. You can buy tickets starting at just $20 at steppenwolf.org. Today on CityCast Chicago, the city announces changes to our shelter system. We're outside staring at the moon, and we've got the winner of our Icon tournament. Helping me break it all down, our executive producer, Simone Alicea. It's Tuesday, September 17th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Good morning, Simone. How you feeling?
Hey, Jacoby. How are you?
I ain't out here complaining. Another day. Happy to be here with you. Over the weekend, despite even telling people on the show to kind of watch out, prepare for the traffic that was expected. I'm gonna be real, I didn't.
Got caught in some caravans, did ya?
From both ways. I went out Saturday northwest. I was coming back. Every exit off the highway was shut down. Sunday, coming from my mom's house from the south, further south, all of the exits were shut down. 15-minute drives became an hour 45. Honestly, I got off at one point on the highway and just like walked off the Morgan exit and just made my way back home on the Blue Line. But other than that, it was a solid weekend. Today, we are announcing the winner of our Chicago Icon Tourney. Back a couple of weeks ago, we did it as a show, kind of ran through 90s Bulls, 85 Bears, House Drill, and we came down to the 90s Bulls as the ultimate most Chicago thing. But we gave CityCast Chicago listeners and Hey Chicago readers an opportunity to weigh in. And after a few rounds, Simone, they've come to a completely different conclusion.
Yeah, I gotta say, the Sears Tower has won out as the most Chicago thing. Sears Tower just really ran away with it. In the last round, they were up against the Chicago-style hot dog, and the Sears Tower won 71% to 29%. It was not even close, a little bit.
Gee, in the next tourney, I feel like Mexican Independence Day caravans got to face off against something, because those things, they endure. No matter what happened, they were still out here. And similar to the Sears Tower, you end up seeing it in different parts of the city, wherever you are, night and day. I'm not really shocked with this overall winner. A lot of people told me that, at least with the 8 we put up, the Sears Tower was a strong 1 or 2 seed. And so I'm not really shocked with it.
No, but I'm excited. Stay tuned. Watch this space for more debates around the most Chicago things of all time.
Something we wanted to update listeners on is the state of the city's shelters. And I mean that on 2 fronts. Not only the city's shelters for those experiencing homelessness, but also the city's migrant shelters. Recently, we've announced closures. We've announced some consolidation, but also some news has come out about the way the city has been managing shelters, particularly in the last month and a half with the DNC, which took over the city for a week back in August. Simone, can you walk me through some of these updates, starting with the migrant shelters that are likely to close soon?
Yeah, so the city announced that they're closing 3 shelters, one in Pilsen, one in West Loop. Those are set to close October 1st, and then one in Hyde Park, which is set to close later in October. And the about 1,200 people from those shelters will be relocated to one of the 14 other shelters that the city is operating for new arrivals. There was an expected surge, right? There was all this talk leading up to the DNC, remember, of Texas Governor Greg Abbott, others might be sending more people to Chicago ahead of the DNC to make some kind of political statement. They even said they were going to do it. It never happened.
Right. They were out here posturing the entire time, especially at their RNC up in Milwaukee. But like it didn't happen.
Yeah, it never materialized. We're in a really different position now than we were a year ago. Now, the city is currently housing about 5,500, just under 5,500 migrants in its shelter system, and a lot has changed. The city has enacted an eviction policy. You can only stay in the shelters for a certain period of time. That said, the vast majority of people who have been evicted from city shelters end up continuing to live in city facilities in some capacity or another because they kind of get cycled back through the system. The other thing that has happened, of course, is President Joe Biden enacted some border restrictions on people's ability to request asylum. And that is maybe having an effect as well, potentially, on how many people are arriving to Chicago. But city officials have said basically, that closing these shelters, in addition to just sort of like right sizing, right? There's just fewer people in shelters right now. It's also part of this effort to combine the city's homeless shelter system, its existing shelter system for people experiencing homelessness, and this migrant shelter system, which was kind of stood up, has been built and stood up in kind of an ad hoc way over the past 3-ish years.
I mean, I'm interested to see what this consolidation looks like. I'm very skeptical that means we're going to have more coordination on the city's front, that more people are going to be able to find temporary housing. I mean, just back in June, when the city released its data on the snapshot it takes of the city's population of individuals experiencing homelessness, which advocates already say is a low estimate. They say it was threefold the number it was June of last year, largely due to asylum seekers, new arrivals who have been moved out of the shelter system, maybe back into the shelter system, and then ultimately out onto the streets of Chicago. And so as it's closing facilities, as it's relocating people and evicting people simultaneously, I hope listeners understand that like the last option for people who aren't able to get into a temporary apartment, find some type of permanent housing, is ultimately onto the streets of Chicago. So I hope this consolidation maybe helps us better keep track of individuals, maybe opens up the shelter system to more new arrivals. But I'm very concerned.
Well, we're going to get more details this week about what the city plans to do and how this consolidation might work. There's going to be a community meeting on Thursday where the city will release sort of the phase 1 of this planning that has been going since this spring. And, to your point, the idea here, right, is that these are in many ways the same problem, right? It's people who don't have a place to live, who need a place to live, who need a place both to be sheltered temporarily and get into permanent housing, right?
But inside of the city's existing shelter system, are there increased language services? Are there people who can help not only guide people towards potential work opportunities, but in this case, people are also trying to seek asylum. So is the city going to expand those services across the shelter system?
And this is the complicated part, right? On its face, it's the same problem, but there's a reason that these things kind of got stood up in different ways, right? Trying to provide services for someone who is, say, chronically homeless, someone who has been living on the streets for a really long time, who maybe is unable to work because of disability, for example, or some other reason. that is really different than helping a person who is unable to legally work, due to paperwork reasons, maybe is having a language barrier, has only been in the country for, less than a year. These are different needs. And the providers recognize that, the people who have worked with new arrivals, haven't necessarily worked with the system that we have for providing services to people who are homeless. And so it's a tall task to, again, to combine these things, especially as different people are sort of so entrenched in their silos. It's sort of an effort by both the city and the state. One thing that they say will kind of help is that this would help move management of the shelter system for everybody into sort of the local nonprofit workforce rather than, for example, we have talked about on this show, the contractors that the city and state have worked with to manage, the out-of-state contractors that the city and state have worked with to manage migrant shelters, and how that has caused some problems, questions about, how well are they running these facilities and why are we paying them so much? And like, what are these payments actually going to? The hope is that a coordinated system, just would provide more oversight and standardization, being able to do that. But the problem is getting to coordination and consolidation. That is a tall task, which is why, months after this was initially announced, we're just now getting to this phase 1 introduction of the plan.
It feels like spreading people across the city even more out of, like you said, new arrival migrant shelters, in many cases ran by private actors, who then introduces a whole other host of transparency problems, vulnerability problems. But again, seeing this consolidation happen while at the same time there is news that the city is closing shelters for the existing homeless population while simultaneously getting rid of tent encampments across the city over the last couple of months, Simone, shows that system itself is in disarray at the same time.
Yes. Right. So this is the other thing that sort of critics will point out, is that it's not like our shelter system was working extraordinarily well to begin with. And I think, as you point out, exemplified by this story, that the city has just closed a temporary shelter. This was a former hotel in Gold Coast. And initially it opened last winter as, an option to bring people inside during the cold months. As the DNC approached, and we did, we talked about this on the show. There's a lot of reporting about this. As the DNC approached, the city began removing people from tent encampments around the city, around United Center. And one of the places that they relocated people to was this former hotel in Gold Coast. Now the shelter has been closed. Now the city says that, most of the people who had been living in encampments and were then moved to the Tremont, the former Tremont Hotel, most of them were connected to housing when the shelter closed, while the rest were offered space in shelters elsewhere. The folks who had been staying there say the picture is a little more complicated, and advocates as well, people being moved to housing, maybe yes, but housing potentially on the far south side when their communities and a lot of their services had been downtown. And so getting moved far away from kind of where their base of, their sort of central base has been, their home base has been. Also, the other issue is that a lot of the hotel shelter situation offered people a chance to stay in individual rooms, which is a really big deal. There are a lot of reasons why congregate shelters, when it's a bunch of people sleeping in a big room, provide problems. It's a safety concern, and also it's just sort of like a dignity thing, right? Like it to be able to have a door that closes is such a huge deal. And so if you're one of the people who got moved into one of the existing shelters, maybe there are reasons that you don't want to go to one of those shelters, and then maybe you end up back in a tent. All of this, right? It's all, the reason we're talking about all this is that they're all related. There is this sort of fundamental problem of vulnerable people who are unable to, for whatever reason, to find work, to find housing. And the city is trying in the capacity that it can to provide, but also the city has these political considerations, and the city leaders have these political considerations that they're making, and we're making around the DNC and et cetera. But the fact of the matter is we still have people who need places to live.
At this time, the most we know is we'll learn more, as you said earlier, at this community meeting later Thursday. To follow along for updates on that, please bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. And while you're there, subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, where we're going to send you these things and so much more every morning, Monday through Friday, directly to your inbox. Now, one thing we know to be true about CityCast listeners is y'all love to give back. And how do we know this? Well, because we get a lot of questions in our inbox every day about how to get involved in your community. That's why you need to know about Find Your Cause from Chicago Cares. It's an event where you can connect with local organizations about volunteer opportunities. Chicago Cares is the city's leading volunteer organization, and at Find Your Cause, you can learn about the work that grassroots orgs are doing on the south, west, and northwest sides. Whether you got special skills to donate, you're interested in serving on a board, or you're just looking for some hands-on way to get involved, you could probably find it at Find Your Cause. Plus, you might be able to grab a treat from Ida's Artisan Ice Cream or get a little history lesson from Chicago's one and only Sherman Dilla Thomas. This event is happening September 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Discover Shine Bright Community Center in Chatham. Visit chicagocares.org to register now.
At the heart of Chicago, there's Navy Pier. It's a place where the Centennial Ferris wheel gives views for days. It's where boat tours take off and where the music is always on. It's where you can spin around on rides, share around with friends, and taste every flavor Chicago has to offer. This is Navy Pier, and this is what it's made for. Plan your visit at NavyPier.org.
Simone, today is the start for many people, Moon Festival, Moon Cake Festival, Mid-Autumn Festival. And as our resident stargazer, someone who loves to look up at the moon, you wanted to give us a little stargazing corner.
Yeah, a little, I call it a sky report, but as you point out, that makes it sound like I'm talking women's basketball. So tonight, if you go outside, no other night, this year, no other night ever. Tonight is the night to get out and look up, because it will be the easiest stargazing you've ever done, because tonight, not only are we having the harvest moon, which I think, if as you mentioned, lots of moon festivals, this is a very special time. It's also going to be a super moon. That means the moon is at its closest point in orbit to Earth, and it is going to be really, really big. It is a super blood moon, which means it's going to have a reddish kind of hue to it. So it's going to look really cool. And there's a partial lunar eclipse on top of all that, where Earth's shadow is going to be partially obscuring the moon itself, kind of at the top. It'll look like a little bite taken out of a cookie. And it will be so easy to see, even with all the city lights, everything that's going on. You can literally just walk outside and look up and to the south, and you will see it at 9:45 p.m. That is going to be when the peak partial eclipse is seen in Chicago. And so I highly recommend it. If you've never thought about stargazing, thought about looking up, this is literally the easiest opportunity to see something cool in the sky tonight.
All right, so if I'm going outside, like, what is it going to feel like? What's the weather tonight? How do I need to dress?
So luckily, we are still in this sort of period of warm weather, this like very summery, we've been having these kind of warm, humid nights, right? Still, it hasn't quite made the turn to fall yet. So I think that's the other reason why tonight is a great night to get out, because you can go out with a light jacket, a sweatshirt, maybe no sweatshirt, maybe no jacket, and walk outside and look up. So it's going to be a real easy time. That said, one other thing that's happening in the skies in the next few days is we've got the equinox coming. on Sunday, September 22nd. Most people will probably know this as just, Chicago Henge. That's when the sun aligns with the east-west grid. So you're going to get your pictures off. But also, it means, I'm really sorry to say, that we are hurtling towards the shortest day of the year. And it's going to start getting really dark really early. So that's why you got to enjoy the darkness. That's what stargazing is you got to be outside in the dark. And if it's going to get dark at, 6:30 p.m., which it will be starting next week, then, you got to at least enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah, there's going to be a fall equinox dance celebration in North Park on Saturday, Mid-Autumn Moon Festival in Uptown near you, as well as a Mid-Autumn Moon Festival at the Burnham Wildlife Corridor. And luckily, all three of those events are free. So people got a way to get out and celebrate. I have a really good view of the moon now in all of my rooms because all of my windows are south facing. And so wherever I am in my apartment now, and it is so beautiful to just like sit there and watch it sort of dance across the sky at night. And so shout out again to Simone Alicea's Moon Report. Please, if you can, as she said, maybe just get outside a little bit, stare up at the blood moon.
The super blood moon is what it is.
Get outside and stare up at the super blood moon.
Blood harvest moon.
That shit sounds so dope. Speaking of events and festivals, every single Tuesday this summer, thanks to our sponsors over at Revolution Brewing, we have been bringing you some of the best festivals to put on your calendar this forthcoming weekend. And Simone, in the spirit of fall, in the spirit of the super harvest, blood moon, there are a lot of fall themed festivals this weekend. We got at Lincoln Park Zoo on Friday, they got Oktoberfest. And then on Saturday, they got Oktoberfest. Naperville got an Irish festival this weekend, Apple Fest out in Long Grove. But there are a ton of music festivals happening this weekend, big and small, around the city as well. Let's just get this one out the way. Simone, the most controversial festival happening this weekend.
Yes, Riot Fest has returned to Douglas Park. Right. So Riot Fest has been in Douglas Park for the past several years, moved from Humboldt Park, a decade ago or so.
Mm-hmm. They got pushed out of Humboldt Park by a lot of residents who said the festival didn't do enough to give back to the community, took away from access to the park, was a bit of a nuisance, got over to Douglas Park. Let's just say the story didn't fully change. Residents felt the same way, that the festival isn't necessarily of or for the community members that are there, doesn't give back enough. Let's be fair. The alder in that area, Monique Scott, has pushed back and said that Riot Fest is something she wants in the neighborhood. She fought very hard. That back and forth seemingly resulted earlier in the summer with Riot Fest saying, like, throwing their hands up, saying, the Chicago Park District isn't making it easy for us to be here. We're going to take our ball and leave, head out to Bridgeview to SeatGeek Stadium, a place that has hosted music festivals throughout the summer already. That was very confusing, though, Simone. Why?
Well, because then, there was I feel like there was a little bit of excitement, right? Like, all right, I guess we'll drive out to the burbs. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
We'll deal.
Riot Land. They'll make it a whole thing.
And then the Red Stars, Chicago's professional women's soccer team, came out and was like, we have a home game that weekend. How? What? How is this gonna...
Why?
What are we doing?
Who?
And we never really got an answer to how that was going to work by the time that Riot Fest came back a month or so later, a month and a half later, and was like, so actually we're going back to Douglas Park. JK.
That whole Riot Land thing looked nice. Got the mock-ups to you. Faux map. Scrap it.
No. We are going to go back to Douglas Park. They just got their final permit approvals from the Chicago Park District. And so it's happening again. Riot Fest, it's tough because I will say of all of the big music festivals that Chicago has, the Riot Fest lineup is the lineup for me. There's a part of me that's like, is it worth seeing Fall Out Boy? But then I remember that I don't like being in massive crowds outside for that long.
Marley Brothers performing Bob Marley, Public Enemy, Cypress Hill.
It's got a great lineup.
Yeah, it's definitely some joints on there. It's definitely some joints on there.
That is definitely the biggest fest that's happening this weekend. And I think the last of the major music festivals of the season. For sure. We are really kind of winding down here as we get into September.
Well, as this big fest is happening in Douglas Park, there'll be Tiny Fest over in North Center, music festival, Saturday and Sunday. Mostly youth performers are going to be on the stage. You also got the Inglewood Jazz Festival on Saturday. You got the Timbre Music Festival. So if you are in North Lawndale, want to get away from Douglas Park, but still want to enjoy a little music, there'll be neo soul, Afro jazz, R&B, soul music out at the Timbre Music Festival in North Lawndale. And then we got a couple of like food, sports festivals as well. The Premier League Fan Fest is coming to Lincoln Park, which, I mean, in no small words, is a huge festival that just popped up on my radar last week. But people are going to be out there with big screens watching some of the biggest matchups in English football.
I kind of just want to go see what it's about. You know what I mean? I just got a curiosity about it.
On Sunday, Man City versus Arsenal. People are going to be watching that. West Ham versus Chelsea. These are some names that I do know.
Are the matches happening at like a normal, like reasonable hours?
Yeah. 11:30 a.m., 9 a.m., 6:30 a.m. Yeah.
Super reasonable 6 a.m. is a little early, but the rest of those are super reasonable.
Latine Festival is happening in Pilsen this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 7. We will drop links to these events in our show notes, but also please follow our website, chicago.citycast.fm, where we have a great events calendar that we're constantly updating throughout the month. So again, bookmark that website.
Speaking of our events calendar, Jacoby, in addition to the calendar, which is always there, you can always find, you may have heard that we have just launched a special perk for CityCast Chicago members. Members are the folks who help support us, make CityCast Chicago possible. And now every Monday, members will get a special members-only events email previewing events for the week ahead. And so if that is something that you want in your inbox, you can become a member right now at membership.citycast.fm.
I want to give a huge shout out to our executive producer, Simone Alisea. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
And to the rest of you, I want to thank you by leaving you with some good news. I got one more event for you. The Chicago Football Classic kicks off at Soldier Field Saturday when Morehouse takes on Kentucky State. But there are also some great events happening across the city this week in celebration, including the HBCU night at Wrigley with the Cubs on Thursday, a pep rally at Daily Plaza Friday where the bands are going to face off, and we got vendor markets and career fairs at Soldier Field the morning of the game. I got a link for you in the show notes. As always, I appreciate you for listening and reading, for becoming a member, for sharing this with your friends and family, for leaving comments wherever you listen to the podcast. All of those things help people find CityCast Chicago, and it means the world to us. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace. Super Blood Moon. Ooh, super.
Go see the Super Blood Moon.